America is doubling down on strength, from the Pacific Rim to the newest carrier in the fleet. But is Washington making the right trade-offs to secure our future? Welcome to the Deep Dive. This week, we've looked at a whole stack of sources covering the U.S. strategic pivot. And, we found this consistent theme: decisive action, but action coupled with some pretty serious trade-offs. Our mission today is to unpack three major events that are kind of converging right now: the big reinforcement of the U.S.-Japan alliance, the high-stakes use of economic leverage against China, and this, surprising internal debate over our next generation of aircraft carriers. Should they rely on magnets or just, a hammer and a blowtorch?
Yeah, we're really seeing the real-time calculation of risk here. It's quite something. The convergence of these events, you've got the new conservative Japanese prime minister, the president's Asia tour, that looming China tariff deadline. It all shows Washington prioritizing action. They've vowed a stronger alliance aboard the USS George Washington, facing what Japan itself calls an unprecedented security environment. And at the same time, you had the threat of that massive 100% tariff being used to gain ground on really vital domestic issues, things like the fentanyl crisis, rare earth security. So we're looking beyond just the headlines, digging into the tough strategic and economic choices that determine if this, let's say, aggressive posture will actually lead to durable national gains or if it risks more global instability.
Okay, let's start there then with the U.S.-Japan alliance. It's often hailed as the greatest in the world, but it's facing these escalating tensions in the region. And the new Japanese Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, a conservative of the U.S. president, publicly called a winner, she describes the security environment as, truly unprecedented.
It is unprecedented because Japan sees three hostile powers. You've got China, Russia, and North Korea right there, basically on its doorstep. China specifically is ramping up drills in the South China Sea, increasing pressure on Taiwan. It's forcing Japan to show, unwavering determination.
And Takaichi's message seems really firm on this. Peace cannot be preserved by words alone. It can be protected only when there is an unwavering determination and action. So what concrete action is she actually taking?
Well, she's fundamentally reinforcing Japan's defense capabilities. And the big move is accelerating the defense budget increase. The original plan was to reach 2% of GDP over 2 years. She's now pulling that timeline forward immediately, aiming to hit that target by the end of this current fiscal year.
Wow, this year. That's a huge acceleration. That's a massive commitment.
It really is a tangible commitment.
But here's where it gets interesting, right? The tension in the relationship. Washington is demanding Japan take on a higher military burden. I've seen figures mentioning potentially up to 5% of GDP buying more American weapons.
That's the classic ally dilemma, isn't it? The U.S. wants Japan to be stronger, more capable as a partner, taking on more military risk. But, sources suggest Washington is still unwilling to grant Japan full strategic autonomy in return.
So more responsibility, but not necessarily more freedom to act independently.
Exactly. So while the alliance gets stronger on paper with Japan's increased commitment, these underlying contradictions persist. Who really calls the shots on security policy, on trade? It's a very delicate balance of demands versus control.
Okay, that focus on readiness in the Pacific.
Yeah.
It brings us right back home, actually. Because the Navy is having its own pretty intense internal debate over what readiness really means, specifically with the new Ford-class aircraft carriers. It sounds like a fundamental choice between, cutting-edge technology and battlefield reliability.
It really is the ultimate trade-off. Are you fielding reliable capability right now, or are you waiting for advanced technology that's, proven to be troubled? The president seems to be pushing for an executive order to revert the new carriers back to the tried-and-true systems, steam-powered catapults and hydraulic elevators.
So ditching the complex modern systems, that's the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMLs, and the advanced weapons elevators, the AWE. What were those supposed to do in the first place? Why invest so much?
Well, the promise was pretty revolutionary. EMLs offered smoother acceleration for launching planes, potentially less wear and tear on the aircraft themselves, and theoretically a higher launch rate than the old steam systems. And AWE promised faster, more automated delivery of ordnance from below deck to the flight deck, more efficient, faster rearming.
But the reality hasn't lived up to the promise.
Not consistently, no. In practice, these advanced systems have faced chronic reliability issues, maintenance problems, things that severely reduce how much time the carrier is actually operational and ready to go.
And the rationale for switching back to steam sounds like pure pragmatism. I heard the quote that the old steam systems can be used with a hammer and blowtorch.
Right.
whereas the electromagnetic systems need the most brilliant people in the world just to troubleshoot them, which doesn't sound ideal if you're deployed far from home.
Exactly. For a fleet operating globally, that simple repairability is a huge advantage. That's the core of the efficiency argument.
But isn't there a counter-argument? Like, is this just politically motivated, common sense, overriding genuine, necessary, long-term military modernization?
Well, that's the pushback. Reverting to steam now, kind of mid-design for future carriers, it would require an extremely costly and time-consuming redesign. That's the phrase being used.
Which means delays.
Further delays in getting these new needed carriers into service. Absolutely.
So the Navy, or at least the administration, seems to be trading potential future efficiency gains for definite current readiness. It's a powerful statement, really. Simple, robust systems might be seen as more valuable in a real confrontation than high-tech headaches.
It's a fascinating choice.
Okay, let's shift gears now from military hardware to economic instruments of power. Tariffs. Washington's been pretty clear these days that tariffs are less about raising revenue and more about forcing diplomatic results. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent actually said the threat of that huge 100% tariff on China did give us a great deal of leverage.
Yes, and we can actually put some numbers on that leverage using economic modeling. It's quite interesting. When you look at tariffs, there are really two key potential goals, and they involve different rate structures. One is maximizing government revenue, just cash for the Treasury. The other is maximizing consumption gains for American households, what helps the average person buy more.
Okay, let's try and nail these numbers down. Maybe keep this simple, like 8th grade level simple for our listeners. If Washington just wants to maximize the cash flow into the Treasury, what tariff rate does that?
Right. Well, if you assume, and this is a big if you assume no foreign retaliation, the universal tariff rate that maximizes government revenue is actually over 70%.
70%.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's the tax cash maximization rate. What about the rate that actually helps the American consumer the most? The one that boosts real private consumption?
That sweet spot is much, much lower. It's around 25%. But here's the really fascinating part. Even that 25% rate, assuming the U.S. acts totally unilaterally, no retaliation,
Yeah.
it only yields a peak increase in national consumption of about 0.5%, 0.5%.
Wait, hold on. So even in the absolute best case scenario, where we set the terms and nobody fights back, the national net benefit to the average consumer is only 0.5%.
That's what the model suggests.
That really underscores that the goal here is leverage, right? It's a means to an end, not really a primary policy for generating wealth for the population.
Exactly, it's an instrument. But what happens if, or rather when, foreign countries decide to fight back with their own tariffs?
The retaliation factor. What does that do to the numbers?
Well, that small consumption sweet spot, it vanishes completely. The moment foreign countries retaliate, any tariff increase above the existing sort of 1% to 2% baseline rate leads directly to net consumption losses for U.S. households.
Okay, so the risk is incredibly high if it sparks a trade war.
Very high. And furthermore, the impact isn't even felt evenly across the U.S. Even in that best case unilateral 25% scenario, you see winners and losers domestically. Commodity-heavy states, say like Wyoming, might post consumption gains up to maybe 2.3%, but export-oriented states often experience losses.
Which helps explain why support for these kinds of protectionist policies can be so geographically concentrated. You see where the benefits or perceived benefits lie.
Precisely.
So it looks like that leverage, that threat, actually worked this time. Treasury Secretary Bessent confirmed those additional 100% tariffs are now effectively off the table. So what breakthroughs were forced under this pressure?
It seems China came to the table ready to negotiate what the administration is calling a big deal, basically bundling several really critical national issues together.
The big deal. That sounds ambitious.
It is, and it signals, I think, a willingness by Washington to take a pretty significant diplomatic risk to try and force comprehensive solutions on major priorities all at once.
Okay, what are the key elements? Two seem to stand out immediately in terms of U.S. security and, frankly, human impact. The fentanyl crisis and rare earth security.
Absolutely. On fentanyl, getting cooperation from Beijing to finally crack down on the chemical precursors flowing out of China, that would have an enormous human impact. I mean, potentially sparing thousands of American families from the devastation of overdoses, getting movement on that long-standing diplomatic sticking point would be huge.
Huge is right. And the rare earths.
That's critical, too. China apparently agreed to delay implementing restrictions on rare earth exports for 1 year while the policy is reconsidered. And as you know, rare earths are absolutely vital for everything from military jets to consumer electronics. Our advanced systems depend on them.
So this sounds like a major win, potentially, on two fronts that directly hit U.S. safety and military readiness. But you mentioned the high risk of this bundled big deal approach. What are the concerns there? What worries the experts?
Well, the strategy is definitely bold, but experts are warning the entire deal could, and this is the phrase used, collapse under the weight of its own ambition.
How so?
Because you're bundling all these difficult issues together, trade deficits, fentanyl, export restrictions, plus the really intractable technology conflict over AI and semiconductors. It means a failure in one area, say, if the tech conflict deepens.
Yeah.
It could hold success in other areas hostage. China could easily pull back on that critical fentanyl cooperation, for example, if they feel pressured elsewhere.
Ah, so everything is linked, which increases the potential fallout if one part breaks down.
Precisely. Diplomatic history kind of suggests that steady, incremental progress, smaller deals, step by step, often results in more durable wins than trying to achieve one massive, complex, grand bargain all at once. It's just inherently more fragile.
Okay, so this deep dive today has really shown us a U.S. strategic posture that's defined by, well, firm alliances like we saw with Japan accelerating its defense spending to counter those regional threats. We've seen a clear commitment to efficiency, maybe even common sense, over complex advancement in defense procurement, that whole steam versus magnets debate for the carriers. And we've analyzed the calculated use of economic power, where tariffs were apparently successfully used as leverage to force potential breakthroughs on huge issues like fentanyl and rare earth security.
Right. And hopefully you now have the statistics and the strategic context behind some of this week's most consequential global decisions. From why that 25% tariff rate is considered the economic sweet spot for consumers, before retaliation anyway, to why reliability seems to be winning out over high-tech complexity in the carrier debate right now. The consistent theme here seems to be a preference for demonstrable strength and, maybe above all, reliable results.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If the president is demanding simple, reliable, easily fixable technology for our carriers, steam, instead of magnets reflecting this preference for durability in warfighting, does that raise a question about our diplomacy too? Are modest, durable trade agreements, perhaps achieved incrementally, ultimately better for long-term geopolitical stability than a complex, high-stakes, big deal that, as the experts warn, risks collapsing under its all weight? What value should we place on durability versus sheer scale and national strategy? Something to think about.